WiSP Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello, I'm Abby Ehler, and this is The Sailing Show on WiSP Sports Radio. The Sailing Show is a co-production between the Magenta project and WiSP Sports, aiming to increase the coverage of women's sport.
3, 2, 1, and on!
My guest on this month's episode is a lady who I have had the pleasure of sailing around the world with, and someone who knows how to take on a challenge for a good cause and can really smash some boundaries. So please welcome Sara Hastreiter to the show. Sara, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Abby. Nice to spend some time together.
On the telephone with you. Where are you currently at the moment?
I am just outside San Francisco, California.
Aha, and I am sat in rainy UK, so we are worlds apart. Sara, I wanted to start by chatting about some of these mountainous challenges that you have on your horizon. Literally, you're planning to become the first woman to have sailed the 7 seas and climbed the 7 peaks. I know you as a sailor, so tell me, where has this climbing ambition come from?
The climbing ambition actually originated probably about a year and a half after we finished the Volvo. As you intimately know, we kind of formed the Magenta project in order to keep the momentum of what we had, generated during Team SCA. And our goal with that was to try to create opportunities at the highest end of the sport and to continue sailing together. And, the biggest goal was really to find sponsorship for the next Volvo. And I had kind of just moved back to the U.S., so I ended up being kind of, separated from everything. But I just took some time, really, to step away from sailing and take on a few other challenges. And I did a trek to the Himalayas, and it was kind of around the time where it was towards the end of our cutoff date in terms of finding money for the next Volvo. It was not going to be under 30 for the next race, nor was I for the first one, but it was going to be more important, I think, for the next one for someone like me. And basically, when I saw that the Volvo may not be a potential for me, I wanted a challenge that was equally as big. And just having come back from Everest Base Camp, it really struck me that to come from the Everest of sailing, climbing Mount Everest might be the equivalent. And from there, I kind of generated a training plan. I gave myself 2 years and, laid out different peaks that I could see that would obviously lay out a training path to be ready for Everest. And then I just kind of started to figure out how I could make all of those things happen. And I'm just someone who's very goal orientated, and I like having something that just seems so insurmountable that I have to break it down over long periods of time to make it work and to train for it. And so I really was just trying to have something else in my life when the Volvo didn't seem an option anymore.
It's amazing, and I think there must obviously be some similarities between the sea and the mountains, but I'm sure there may be some things that you found even more challenging in the mountains, despite having crossed some of the gnarliest seas. Would that be the case?
Yeah, I think there's more similarities than there are differences, really. Especially, the mental aspect is so important. And I feel like everything that's come from being in kind of the extreme side of sailing translates, seamlessly into the mountainside. And I'd say the biggest difference is that you actually have to carry yourself. it's a lot more cardiovascular work, and when you get tired, you stop and the journey forward stops. Whereas with sailing, it's more of a team effort and powered by nature, and most of the time you are, moving forward. Although I do have to say I'm pretty grateful with the fact that when you stop and you get into your tent, you're allowed to sleep, and no one comes and wakes you up for a drive. You don't have to put all your clothes on for 30 minutes and then try to go back to sleep. So that's one thing I am grateful for.
But I'm sure the hardships are still there, aren't they, in terms of the freeze-dried food and the cold and the wet.
Yeah.
Now, with your climbing, are you doing this mostly on your own? So when you're attempting these peaks, are you climbing solo or with a team?
I go with guided companies. Most of these peaks are in national parks, and you have to go with some sort of guide. And I don't know anyone that I'm going with, so in that way I'm, kind of alone. But there are people in the group, and there are guides.
It's interesting, isn't it? I guess the point you made about the sailing is it's very much a team around you, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. But quite different. Where, as you said, where it's really about you and about pushing yourself to reach those peaks. Now your challenge, or the mission that you have set yourself, is to become the first woman to achieve the feat of sailing the 7 seas, which you have already achieved, and climbing the 7 peaks. So where did that wanting to become that first woman, where has that come from, to tick those boxes?
Well, it started originally with, me knowing that I would have to find corporate partnership, sponsorship in order to finish the project when the project was originally just Everest, and kind of, looking at what angles made it more appealing media-wise, and because that's very important, that you have a platform that you can help sell a product or a story or whatever it is. So I kind of was looking at the first female to sail around Cape Horn and climb Mount Everest, because as we also call Cape Horn sometimes the Everest of sailing. Or having been the first person to do the Volvo and climb Mount Everest. And then after some chats with kind of marketing friends, they just said doing the Volvo and climbing Mount Everest wasn't enough, which, we know how big those tasks are, so it seems pretty unbelievable.
Yeah.
But when I kind of sat down and I looked at what I'd already accomplished and what was coming up in my future, and then how I planned to get to Mount Everest through my training climbs, I was well on my way to climbing most of the 7 summits anyway. Mm-hmm. And I found out there was only one person who's ever sailed the 7 seas and climbed the 7 summits. That's an American gentleman, and so there's a world first record opportunity there. And there really aren't very many world first records that are kind of the big monumental ones left anymore. There's obscure ones that people make up all the time. The first person to walk backwards up a river or something. They get pretty silly now. People standing at the top of Everest with their pants down. So I was really excited to find one that was
still
pretty monumental,
indeed,
but achievable from where I was already at.
Yeah, and I think I found a quote from the man who has achieved this. He said, "We are capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit." So I think that's your motto almost, isn't it? That you're achieving so much more than what you've set out. Now, talk us through your next peak is Denali, I believe, in Alaska, which are you planning to attempt in May? Is that?
Yes.
And so what will your training look like between now and May?
So, these past few months it started to get pretty serious. I was just in France for 6 weeks, and that for me was really just, intense cardio, and a lot of it is just figuring out kit, figuring out how to layer for that type of exertion plus exposure. In the Volvo, we're always trying to balance that as well. The breathability of something versus the permeability of it to water, and the layering systems, and the breathability of those base layers and mid layers, and so I find that stuff's really, really important to me. So just being in France and kind of being in the cold, being out at night, kind of pushing my own comfort zones now and again, and just really working the cardio side, because I had been in Florida, and there's not even a hill to be found in the whole state, so I needed to go somewhere else to do that. So a lot of climbing up hills, really. They say the best way to train for these things is to go out and do them. So that's really the practical side of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's true of most things, isn't it? The best training is the most specific training you can do.
Yeah.
One thing you touched on was just having a platform. You talked a little bit about finding corporate supporters. But as part of your Seven Peaks and Seven Seas plan, you have joined with World Hope Charity. I wanted to ask, how do you marry your expeditions with the humanitarian side of it?
Yeah, because I did humanitarian work before I was a sailor, it's always kind of been something in the back of my mind, or that I've tried to integrate into the bigger challenges that I've done. And I think we were really lucky with SCA that, they had some really fantastic initiatives around our team and around the race for us to be a part of. And I did wonder whether to have a charity alignment before I found a corporate sponsorship, or if I should wait to find corporate sponsorship to then support whatever their, social responsibility angle was. But really, my relationship with World Hope, kind of blossomed naturally. And I think for me, it was just, they're such a fantastic partner for me to be able to support. And they're big enough that we can really make an impact with any funds that I bring in. So I didn't hesitate at all to kind of join up with them to be an ambassador for them over the next year, and then hopefully the duration of the remainder of my peaks. We met through doing disaster relief work post-hurricanes in Florida, and I think I'm personally focusing on water projects with them. And for me, it's just really an all-encompassing thing where I can touch on female empowerment, sustainability, and just access to a human right, really, in providing access to clean water, or bringing in, desalinization access post-disaster and things like that. So it's really just, I couldn't think of a better subject for my ambitions to support.
That's fantastic. I mean, it sounds amazing, and yeah, I guess we will be following with interest as you set out on this mission. If I could just move away from the mountain stuff and go back to the sailing side of things, you've recently been competing a trial with Stars and Stripes, who are the first All-American America's Cup challenger in 15 years. Could you tell us a little bit about how that's gone?
Yeah, it sounds a bit extreme for me to be going from one of these things to the other, but sailing is one of my biggest passions, and it's still my career, and it's something that I worked really hard on the better part of the past decade. So it's very much still a part of my life. And when this America's Cup team came together, Stars and Stripes, and I mean, even about 6-7 months ago, I was talking to the CEO, and, he mentioned, we are going to have women as a part of this team. So that's something to keep in mind when the trial process starts happening. And, you kind of hear a lot of intentions like this around projects, and you never really know to what extent that's going to mean. And I think, I couldn't even have imagined that this was going to be a possibility within my, career span. And the fact that these guys are completely serious about and committed to having women on the team was just so refreshing. And, I think as the trial process evolved over the past 2 weeks that we were just there, the inclusiveness of this aspect just became more and more apparent. And it was amazing. The team environment there was unbelievable, unlike anything I've really experienced. And that was just a huge central point to the whole 2-week period. And there was some really, really fantastic female sailors there, just fantastic people as well. And it was a really kind of supportive environment instead of a competitive environment. The supportive aspect was just really refreshing, because you always expect to go into those things and just kind of have it be cutthroat, but it wasn't. It was all about building a team and building, a culture around all of the points that they find so important to emphasize, the inclusiveness, diversity, and it being all American. It was pretty special.
That sounds amazing. I mean, it sounds quite different to the trial that we went through at SCA, which was a very competitive environment. So it's very interesting to hear you say that about the more of the supportive nature. And it'd be interesting to follow that team now and just to see how that culture, follows through as they get closer and closer to cup time. Touching on this trialing for a team. I mean, you've trialled with SCA, you've trialled with Stars and Stripes. What would your advice be to any of the women or girls out there who are thinking about putting themselves forward, but perhaps a little scared or lacking confidence, or perhaps just really unsure about how to take that next step or how to approach a trial? What would be your advice?
Well, the most important thing is, if you never ask, the answer will always be no, right? So the most important thing is that you initially put yourself out there. There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable. Everyone is vulnerable on these things, and most people, the majority of people, really underestimate what they have to offer. And a team is a really dynamic thing. It's not just about your sailing skill sets. It's about who you are as a person, what you bring to the team and the team culture, how supportive you are of other people around you, how helpful you are. So, you as an individual have a lot to offer, not just as a sailor. So I think it's just really important, that people aren't so intimidated by the application process that, they at least throw their hat in the ring. The worst that's ever going to happen is they tell you no. And maybe that no comes after an initial trial period. And so then you've had that experience. You've gone through the process. You've gone through the interview. You've gone and maybe you had 2 weeks at a foiling camp in California. That's nothing to bat an eye at. And, one thing that Stars and Stripes did is there was a lot of people that came through the camp, something between like 30 or 35 sailors. And there was a lot of people there that, you could tell that it was almost about just extending an opportunity to them rather than, serious contestants for, one of the 11 spots on the boat. And the objective with the team is to move move the sport forward in the U.S., and we've really been lacking at the higher ends of the sport in terms of the Volvo Ocean Race, the America's Cup, in terms of representation by Americans. And, this is really laying a foundation as they move forward. And in a sense, you slightly handicap yourself by taking these initiatives to say, we're going to have women who are going to be less experienced. We're going to have all Americans, so that, excludes a lot of the people who have previous America's Cup experience. So the best thing that they can have moving forward is a really strong team in the team aspect. So, they realize that, and it permeates everything there, and everyone, just wants us to work out, wants them to, find the remaining funding that they need. And, every person that came to the trial period added to that culture. So that's one thing that people have to, stay focused on when they go there, because you do put a lot of pressure on yourself, but it's not about you. You need to perform well when you're testing, but you also need to support that other person when they're testing. And, you need to perform well on the water, but when you come in, you need to help with pack up, and you need to, look around and see things that need to be done and take initiative. And those are really the most important things is, you and I know in a team environment, it's just taking that extra step to do something and not expecting that it's someone else's job. Yeah. Those things really stand out in a team environment.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point for our listeners to take note. And I hope you won't mind me saying that with Team SCA, you were perhaps one of the least experienced sailors that trialled. But it was the other things that got you through. And that's why ultimately you got the place on the team, was your attitude, the hard work and the work ethic and fitness. They're all attributes that make you stand out. And I think it is really important to take that away, that it's not about being the best. It's about what you can bring to the table in terms of attitude and other skills. So I think that's a great bit of advice. And one other thing you had touched on was the mental aspect of physical pushing yourself is one thing, but mentally having that strength and resilience to push through the bad times. I mean, what have you learnt, through doing the Volvo Ocean Race and through doing these summit attempts? What mental aspects or what mental training or what helps you get through those really low moments?
There's a couple of things. One thing kind of touches on the quote that you brought up earlier, just that you're capable of so much more than you ever thought that you were. And I think a lot of that comes from, most of us growing up in a privileged first world country where, kind of our daily needs are met. So our life struggles are different things. They're not dodging tropical diseases, fetching water, finding food, keeping shelter. So I feel like when we go out into these extreme environments, we're there by choice. And so we've never really been pushed to these places before, but by doing something like the Volvo Ocean Race and a sail change in the Southern Ocean, when you're underwater and it's dark and you're struggling to breathe and it's cold and everything has a sense of urgency to it so that everyone can be safe, the things that you're getting done or having to accomplish, if it was any other setting, you might not be able to do those things. But because it's these extreme environments, it just pushes you to places that you would never otherwise go. And so I feel like having had those opportunities to push into these dark corners and do things that, I never thought I could push myself through, those are what give me the fortitude going forward, because I have that kind of backup assurance that I've been there before, that I've pushed through really hard things. But another thing that I do, that I know some people don't like to do, actually, is put perspective on things. For example, when I climbed Aconcagua, it was a tough day for the summit day, and it was really cold, and there was a lot of people who had to turn back for various reasons. And when it kind of came down to it, we ended up having to go back down about a half a mile. So it was like a mile round trip at about 20,000 feet. So it's really, it's a lot of added time. It's really, really draining. It was kind of there was 2 points where we had decided that we needed to turn around. So it's the mental aspect as well of kind of deciding that, oh my gosh, this summit isn't going to happen. And at the time I had a little teddy bear with me, which belonged to my friend whose 5-year-old son was going through radiation in a 3-year treatment plan for acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is a cancer, childhood cancer. And I just wanted to get this bear to the summit for him because he was going through this really difficult period in his little life. And it was a hard day for me, but he was having a much harder time. And so I really wanted to push, and I ended up kind of turning around at a particular point and going back up, which meant, I was on the summit probably 4 or 5 hours later than, we would have initially wanted to do. And I was the only one from our group that day that made it to the top. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I had something else I was pushing for that gave me perspective that day. And moving forward, my charitable focuses are something that are always at the back of my mind when I'm doing these challenges. And so when I think that things are particularly hard for me and something that I'm choosing to do, I'm reminded of the people that don't have a choice every day with, the struggles that they go through. And so that's something I really hold on to.
That's amazing. Yeah, very, very interesting, the metaphors that you've brought through. And I guess that's a good advice for anyone is, life is always harder than for a lot of other people than what we are going through. And as you said, it's our choice to put ourselves through these things, and we only grow as a person by pushing ourselves in physical and mental barriers. So very interesting to hear. Well, Sarah, I appreciate very much your time and what you chatting to us. It's been really interesting chatting through all the different things that you've got going on at the moment, and really looking forward to following your progress, not only up the mountains but also with potentially with Stars and Stripes. So we'll be looking out for you and wishing you all the best for the future.
Thanks, Allie. I also want to mention that I'm doing 2 trips to Everest Base Camp in the fall, which are for charity. So we're looking for people who might be interested in an adventure that has a charitable angle to it. And the objective is that people raise money for the charity. So it goes towards the World Hope International's water projects. And then people get to do the trips, and I'll be kind of leading those. So there's already a few former SCA sailors that are quite curious and keen to sign up. So, that's something that people, if they're looking for a way to do that, or they're looking for a charity adventure, to keep in mind.
Okay, and if they want to find out more about that, what's the best, is there a website to look at? Or
yeah, they can look at my website, which is www.sara with no h.blue, like the color, and email me directly there, or they can visit the worldhopeinternational.org website and find more information there. So they can email either one of us directly.
Fantastic. Okay, sounds very exciting, and I'll make sure that we put that link in the podcast blurb. Okay. Brilliant. Well, thank you again. Good luck with all the future ventures, and we'll be following you with interest. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Conversations from the world of women's sports. This is WiSP Sports Radio.
Well, that concludes today's show. Thank you very much again, Sarah. It's been very interesting chatting with you. Please continue to follow the Magenta Project on our website and social media. And to keep up to date on women's sport in general, not just sailing, check out WiSP Sports online and on social media. Join us again next month for another episode of The Sailing Show, when we hope to update on the wider topics in the sailing world.
The vision of the Magenta project is to be the worldwide organisation that enables women to have equal access and opportunities in the sport of sailing, empowering and inspiring women across the globe through supporting elite success. Its mission is to upskill athletes to enable them to reach the top of their sport, inspiring generations of female racing sailors and driving change within the sailing industry. Visit the website for more information and to learn about the latest projects, including the mentoring program, at themagentaproject.com. And be sure to follow on social media at the Magenta Proj, that's the Magenta PROJ, on Twitter and Instagram, and the Magenta Project on Facebook.